Hello everyone and welcome to this short intro to Tolley's VAT Adviser, our new online tool which can quickly establish all the VAT obligations on the most complex of domestic or cross-border transactions. So that includes calculating the VAT, some legislative reasoning on which country's rules apply, whether extra VAT registrations are needed, and then preparing a compliance invoice and how to report that in the right return. Adviser can provide all of this in seconds with lots of tools to share the results with colleagues, customers, suppliers, or your clients to get them compliant too. Let's do a common transaction, but which has very different outcomes depending on the countries involved based on their legislative differences. And this one will be a UK business which, post-Brexit, is holding its stocks in a warehouse in Belgium to sell locally to Belgian businesses. So like any tax advisor, our VAT advisor needs 4 basic categories of information to help determine all of that. And firstly, what kind of document is it? Usually a sales invoice, but perhaps you want to check the deductibility on a purchase. So you could choose purchase invoice there, or if you're importing or exporting, likewise, pick the right document there. So let's go with the sales invoice. And if there are any differences between the supply date of the goods or services from the invoice date, or if there's an advance payment, for example, you can change those too, because they will affect the tax point and therefore which return is the transaction recorded in. And by the way, those question marks there, if you hover over those, they'll give you some basic details of what the box needs to continue. Right, next advisor wants to know about the supplier, the seller, and their customer. And basically it's which countries are they from and what's their VAT status. And you can start typing all of that information in, or you can use our preloaded templates. So let's start with the supplier, which is a UK company, so GB. Start typing in company and select there. And you'll see that gives us a UK company with a GB VAT number. Same for the customer. We can start typing in their Belgium, so that's BE, company. By the way, if you wanted to do B2C, then we would just change this to individual. And then we have a consumer because there's no VAT number. But let's stick with company in this instance. And there we are with the local BE VAT number. Right, now we can move on to the 4th section, which is telling advisor about the nature of the goods or services. And there are 3 ways you can tell advisor that. If you look here, you can see a description of all the different types of suppliers and services mentioned in the legislation. And this gives you an idea of the depth of the codified content that we have in Adviser, from the VAT Directive, the UK VAT Act, the Swiss Tax Code, etc. And they're all in here because they have different VAT rates or different treatments, perhaps the reverse charge, or like banking could be exempt. And if you know what your supply is, you can start typing in here. So maybe I'm doing an installation and advisors give me a few suggestions. It could be goods supplied with the installation or just a straight installation service. Secondly, you could use one of our quick picks, other goods, other services and digital services, which we find cover about 90% or more of supplies. But if you really have no idea, perhaps you just use an invoice, then click on the magnifying glass here. You could use the tariff code if you have that, but if not, then you can just start typing in whatever description you may have from the invoice. So let's say I've got medical supplies, and using AI, we're doing a search now and trying to match that up against to all of the items that we've got codified. Now you see here we're getting a few suggestions, equipment or actual medication, and the reason they're in there is because they may have different VAT rates and treatments. But for our transaction, let's just stick with other goods. Now advisors, having a think, realizes it's tangible goods, so needs to know something about the transport and who's responsible. It could be the seller or the buyer, or perhaps you just know the Incoterms. You can select that and pick the right one for you. We'll stick with the seller. Next, advisor wants to know the shipping. So it's suggesting GB, and that's because our supplier is in the GB, but we know that our supplier is holding their goods already in Belgium. And they're making a domestic supply in Belgium, so we can pick BE. External transit, generally no. And now advisor's ready to give us its analysis, and you can see immediately there There's zero VAT should be charged by our UK company to its Belgian customer, but why? And the answer is up in this top left box, legislation, where you can see advisors taking our transaction through all of the EU VAT directive, the Belgian VAT code and the UK VAT Act. And it's determined it's a supply of goods. The place of taxation is Belgium. And if you click on any of these, you can see a reference to the local legislation or the VAT directive to see why advisors come up with that conclusion. And crucially for this transaction, advisors telling us that the Belgian customer is responsible for reporting the VAT. And that's because under the VAT directive, Article 194, member states may shift the obligations over to the customer. And in this case, it's because we have a foreign supplier, the UK company. And you can see this here in the local legislation. We have the official Dutch and French language as well as an English translation. And there is Article 51 of the Belgium tax code, which is reconfirming that Belgium has opted to shift the obligations over to the customer. And then all of this is summarized in this nice diagram here, which confirms it's UK company selling to Belgium customer in Belgium. And if there's any applicable tax case law, then you can also see that and have a read of it there. So moving over now to the invoice, you can see there's confirmation for our UK seller. They should use their GB VAT number and their customer's BE VAT number. And if either of those two VAT numbers aren't in place, then you'll get an alert from an advisor to go and get a new foreign VAT registration. And then very importantly, again, the seller must use this narrative, which is provided from the Belgian legislation to show why it's zero rating, and there's confirmation there, similarly with the wording from the VAT directive reverse charge. Now, if we scroll back up, there's some useful actions here to help us share all of that information. Firstly, you can save this transaction if you want to come back to it another day or if you regularly use it. Then you can create a fully compliant VAT invoice. There you are. You can see the UK company and its Belgium customer with their local VAT numbers, GB and BE, zero VAT. And very importantly down here, you can see you should include the Belgium tax legislation referencing for the zero rating. So that you can download and just email or share with your counterparty or your client. And then going back into Advisor, you can turn all of this into narrative using another AI tool. And this will summarize all of this nicely in a Word document for us. And here it is confirming a UK company is selling to a Belgium company, and you can change the name of those parties. So the UK company is not established in Belgium, which under Article 194 of the VAT directive and the Belgian legislation, VAT is the responsibility of the Belgian customer, and the UK supplier must zero rate, use the reverse charge. And there's a reference to the applicable tax case. And there's confirmation there of the invoice mentioning that should be used by the UK company. And then helpfully, a copy of the diagram that you saw. So you can tidy up the wording there, insert the names of the counterparties, forward that on to your supplier or your customer or perhaps your client so that everyone understands all of their obligations. Okay, let's go back into Advisor. And lastly, a more interactive way to share this transaction and come to some agreement with your counterparties is to send it to them within the application. All you simply do is put in their email address. So I will send it to my Belgium customer with a message asking them to confirm what I've done is correct. And when I press OK, that sends the message to them via an email. They get a URL which will enable them to come into this single transaction in Advisor. They don't need a subscription to it. And they'll see the chat here, and then they can reply to me here. And there you can see they're happy with it. So I'm okay now to send out my sales invoice. So all sides are happy. And that's it. Hopefully this introduction to Tolley's VAT Adviser has been helpful. Thank you. Goodbye.